Hello there, this is Agritalk right here on KTN Farmers TV. My name is Kelvin Nyakundi. Now today we are going to be talking about millet farming in Kenya and also the importance of millet farming, the whole value chain around millet farming and what it gets for you as a farmer in order for you to just get into it. If you had really stopped about just getting into millet farming, you can also go back and see the importance of this crop. And joining me, two gentlemen, great gentlemen. We have Dr. Harish T. Gandhi, who is the principal scientist, breeding lead dry land crops. He's also a global breeding lead dry land cereals at CIMMYT. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, we also have Dr. Mark Nass, who is a plant breeder and senior sorghum and millet scientist at CIMMYT also. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks.
All right, so gentlemen, we are having a great conversation about millets. First of all, let us get into it and start with millet farming in Kenya. Where we are right now, because the crop went silent a bit. Yeah. So just explain to us from where you sit, Mr. Harish, how is millet farming being embraced in Kenya at this moment?
So, largely, the country imports millets. It's not self-sufficient as of now. Our latest, research suggests we are probably importing close to, 25% of the millets than our overall requirement. And in case of sorghum, which is also part of the mix of the millet, we are importing almost 35%. And I think that's probably roughly close to $30–40 million worth of millet, we are importing in Kenya right now. And if you look at the potential as a country, there's a huge potential because in Kenya we have a lot of semi-arid and arid lands. We call them ASAL. And it has a huge potential to expand. And really, first goal could be to reduce that import in the next couple of years, and then take it forward from there.
All right. So, Dr. Mark, Harish has spoken about we as a country are importing millet, and you are a scientist in sorghum and millet. So, what is the reason for this? Because our lands are really fertile to get this crop. So, what is the reason?
Yep. So there are several reasons for this. First would be the area planted to millets. It's only about 200,000 hectares for millets, and also the same area for sorghum. And the yields on these areas are really low compared to other cereal crops. Like for sorghum, it's less than 2 tons per hectare, and for millets, it's probably about 1 ton per hectare. But for maize, I'm not sure, it's about 3 or 4 tons per hectare, and rice can even be up to 5 tons per hectare. So that's the productivity per unit area of land. It's really very low for these crops. Yeah.
All right. And also, still on you, when we come to climate change, of course, it's a topic that has been just repeated all the time, especially when it comes to Kenya and drought. And we experienced a drought just last year towards the end, and also a better part of the start of this year. When you look at millet, it being a crop that can be grown in ASAL regions, why is it not being embraced by people in those areas?
Yeah, that's quite a mix of many reasons, including the perception and the culture, and also the use. The use for maize and other cereals have been really established for feed and for food, even for flour, wheat for flour. But then, Harish, I think the uses for these millets are there are various uses, but
Yeah. So I mean, it's typically considered very traditional, and one of my local Kenyan colleagues says it's been considered food which you give it to the sick people, the millets, because it's a traditional crop. But I think the people are, our habits, even my habits or your habits or everyone's habits, are based upon what we have been eating since our childhood. And I think people are getting too used to eating ugali, which is based off maize,
Yes,
as opposed to based off millets, right? And I think that is one of the reasons. So it's a simple economics. Unless there is a demand for a commodity, people will not grow them. And unless consumers, you and me and others, are saying, we need millets in our diet, the millets will not become a mainstream. So that's one of the reasons why the acreages are dropping, because there is no a real demand coming from consumers. Let's say the Nairobians or people from Kisumu or from other areas. So I think one of the things we need to do is to really raise awareness about the nutritional value of the millets. And it is not only when you eat when you are sick. It's actually something you can consume on a daily basis.
Yes.
As if you're consuming maize-based ugali, right? So I think, we're not saying the maize is bad. We're saying everything is good, but I think we need to have a mixed, balanced diet, and we need to have a diversity in our diets. And I think millet plays such an important role in that, in my opinion.
All right. You've mentioned about the importance of millet. I think we're going to get to that. Let me take you back a bit. Let us look at the science of millet. Why is it very resilient when it comes to dry lands? Better than any other crop, especially, okay, let us just compare it with maize. What is the science behind millet that makes it resilient in drought, in the arid regions?
Sure. So the first thing is the millets, including sorghum and pearl millet, finger millet. Many of these crops are originated in Africa, right? And they are far from the region where the areas were traditionally very dry. All of our crops we eat today, including maize and wheat, they come from the wild. So same way the millets have also come from wild, but those wilderness or those areas were very dry since millions of years ago. So that's one of the reason why the millets are naturally have some level of drought tolerance in them compared to other crops, just because where they come from, right? Where they have originated from.
Yeah, it's a result of thousands of years of evolution of these crops. That's why they were able to build this resilience to drought in these very conditions that exist in sub-Saharan Africa.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Now let's move on to the importance. I believe the importance now that this is where we can tell Kenyans what is it when you grow millet. Why is it important to grow it? What can you get from this kind of crop? All right. So let's start with you. Some of the importance of millet.
Yeah. Let's start with the nutritional value.
Yes.
Okay, so millets typically would have very high iron and zinc content compared to other crops. So I think for millets, I can give a figure of about probably up to 70 parts per million of dry matter weight. So that's the iron and zinc content of millets, and I think Harish, protein content is also very high.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think in general, if you look at the any of the millets, they are known for rich in minerals, as Mark said, iron and zinc. If you look at a finger millet, it's very rich in calcium, very, very high calcium, as much as milk. And if you look at the overall dietary fibers in these millets compared to other crops, it's much higher. And as Mark said, protein is as comparable as any other cereals, such as wheat and maize. So what you're getting is if you eat millets, you're getting more nutrients, more dietary fibers, which is quite critical in today's our lifestyle.
Yes.
So I would say, so millets gives you that added advantage over other cereals in terms of nutrition.
Okay. All right, we've spoken about the nutrition value. Now let's look at a farmer, because now they've heard about the importance. A farmer who wants to grow millet, First of all, you can just explain to us the requirements that someone needs, and also the management practices that goes into millet production for it to just produce good yields.
Yes, so basically, first of all, let's look at why it is good for farmer.
Yes.
So if you look at millets, we talked about its resilience in the dry
Yes.
lands.
Yes.
And so I believe the millets provides an additional option a farmer has in the drier areas where the weather variability, the weather extremes have increased. So this really provides a good option for a farmer to consider, to have in the mix of crops a farmer is considering. The other part is the millets are like we call them dual purpose. So if a farmer has a livestock, let's say a goat or a cattle in house, so after you harvest the grains, the fodder can be essentially used by a farmer to feed the livestock. So it gives an opportunity for a farmer to integrate more than just grain harvest. So the grain can feed the family, surplus can go to the market, and the fodder can become part of the livestock integration. So I think in that sense, I would say millets really provides a three advantage apart from nutrition. It provides the the food, nutrition and food. I consider them two different topics in my opinion, and then also the fodder for the livestock. So I think these are three mixes the farmers are getting.
All right, and Mark, let us look at also the way Harish has explained about the three elements. Now let's look at also the storage, because when it comes to storage, there is usually something that goes wrong because you've harvested very well, and then maybe the millet farmer has harvested very well, but now when it comes to the storage, what goes into storing a crop like millet?
Yeah, I think the good news to our farmers who would like to try finger millet is that finger millet is very has very high storability, or you can store it for many months or even years. But for pearl millet, the issue is not on storage, but once you mill it into flour, the issue I think is rancidity. So some biochemical reactions would make the flour smell unpleasant. Yeah, for sorghum, I think as a seed itself, storage would not be a very much challenge.
Okay.
Particularly finger millet, yeah.
Yes, but after you've ground it to flour, then it's a problem.
For pearl millet.
It's only in pearl millet.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think the suggestion would be if you are ready to use pearl millet, just grind it like store it only for 6 or 7 days, and then use it, consume it. But we are working on a project internally at CIMIT to improve the shelf life of grounded pearl millet flour by modifying some working on improving its ability to have a longer shelf life by looking at some of the genes, underlying genes, which causes this issue. So I think that's in the technology front, some of the areas we are working on.
Right, and we spoke about when we were starting about Kenya importing millet. When we are importing this crop, what are some of the policies that are there that maybe do we have a structure that shows, okay, this is the requirement of the kind of millets that we have, and is there, first of all, even a policy for that?
Well, I'm not aware of what's our import policies there in Kenya, but I would say, Kenya has enough potential to produce their own millet for sure. Okay, and I think it's probably on the policy front. One area could be around, how do we promote cultivation of millet in the country? Could be through maybe proper mapping of the areas where millets has a lot more potential over, let's say, traditional maize. These southeastern counties of Kenya, for example, or the northeastern frontier areas, for example, where there's a lot more potential. So I think that's on the policy front. Maybe there could be an effort to promote millet cultivation, and then also looking at the overall value chain. Right? I think if one of the key challenge farmer face in most countries is that they can produce a lot of any food grain, but it needs to be the supply side. Somebody has to purchase it from them, procure it from them, and I think in that side the potential policies could be around food processing, could be around how do we develop value chains. In many countries now, I originally come from India, so there are food parks, the food processing parks, where the millet is being promoted as one of the commodity, and there are promotions given so that millet is consumed. I think government of Kenya is coming up with a really good blending policy, which requires potentially a maize or flour to be mixed with the other cereals and or maybe other flours, which is I think a good progressive step. But I think there could be other areas that how do we promote the overall food processing of millet. So that way you're building the whole value chain where farmer produces more and the people, there's an industry to consume it. And I think there are some great examples which have happened in case of other crops in Kenya.
All right. On that point, Dr. Mark, he has spoken about us promoting this and trying to make it a point where we even involve the government. So when we look at Kenya, first of all, can we grow millet anywhere in the country, or is there a requirement from maybe different areas that we have, the tropics, the arid areas? So is it grown can it be grown everywhere, first of all?
Yeah, that's for sure. There are areas where millets are more favorably grown. For example, finger millet are typically well suited in the eastern northern part of the country, and the pearl millet is I think towards the western part, while sorghum could be essentially grown throughout the country. So we work with very recently we worked with a group of what we call the product design team. So these are multi-stakeholder groups. We have scientists from Calro. We have a farmer representative, from the brewery and the processors, and also gender specialists. So we work together to build this what we call the market segmentation for these millets, where we can focus our research, our plant breeding. So we have roughly mapped the parts where we can push this project in Kenya, and also the same in other countries as well. So yeah.
All right. He's spoken about other countries. Let's even get out of the country and look at the production of millet in other countries which are doing better than us.
Yep.
What can we learn from those countries? What are they doing better, and how can we pick a leaf from such countries?
Yeah, I think if you look at the pearl millet as an example, you got most of the Western African countries are growing pearl millet, very, very large acreages. So you got countries like Niger, Nigeria, Burkina Faso, in Senegal. All of these countries, minimum grow anywhere from 1 million hectare to 6 million hectares, which is a large quantity. And I believe it's because traditionally the millet has been consumed in these countries since a long time, and there has been a good investment on the development of the new seed varieties and promotion of those seed varieties and making those seed varieties available to the farmer. So I think that's the potential area. Maybe we can jointly work with Calro, Kefis, and other private players. And so that way the millet seed is actually available, which has the high productivity, which is something Mark talked about. If you grow the millets which has been traditionally been available, the productivity levels are maybe different. But the research has been done over the last 10, 15 years, by different institutions, international institutions such as ICRISAT, our institution now, CIMMYT, and the CALRO, and many institutions globally, which can be brought into the Kenya and then packaged into the seed and provided to the farmer, right? So if we do a joint efforts together, I think there's a high potential that, of course, Kenya can be self-sufficient, but also probably net exporter of millet. So yeah, to the world. Yeah.
Right. And Mark, do you have anything to add on what Harish has said when you look at other countries and when you look at Kenya and other countries?
Yeah, I think I could point out some similarities. Kenya has a very healthy scientific research on these crops. For finger millet, I think the last varieties you've released is maybe 2017, so that's fairly recent. For sorghum, I think there's about the same year. But for pearl millet, the last variety that we have released in Kenya was early 2000. So for this crop, we have to work a bit more. Yeah, but I would say that we have here excellent scientists in CalRO, excellent collaborators, and very confident that they can deliver the science part.
All right.
Yeah.
And let's move on to another issue, production. Would you say there are incentives that are just engaging farmers to embrace millet more? Even maybe, say, government policies that are there to just bring farmers into millet farming?
I think the blending policy will be a game changer because it will be required by law. That's my understanding. After a certain time, that all the millers shift to blending the maize flour with the other flours. So my understanding is anywhere from 10 to 15% of production. 10 to 15% of the flour would need to be mixed with the other grains or other flours, right? So I think that will give a big boost for millet production in the country. And I think that's a really great start. And that would mean, that the areas we talked about where these crops can be grown,
Yes.
Probably we need to promote the millet. I would say for a farmer, I think look out for these opportunities, and the other incentives for farmer is as I mentioned earlier, the livestock integration. The other fodder. I think what I heard sometime this year in March, there was a big crisis of availability of fodder for cattle in this country, and I think I know in some countries the fodder has become a big surplus, and where the farmers are actually also selling fodder if they don't have their own livestock. So it could become an additional source of income, to the farmer. And I think so. There are things in play which are happening. So I would say farmers should seriously consider growing millets in the country, in the counties, where it is really suitable.
Okay. All right. And let's move on to value chain. Not value chain, value addition. When you look at value addition of millet, the kinds of things that we can get from millet. First of all, have we exhausted what we can get from millet? Because now it seems the way you said millet is only used for sick people. It's given to sick people, but we have other additions that we can get from this millet. Just give us a little bit of that.
Yes. So, first of all, I don't think we have exhausted all the potential we can do from millet. There's a branch of science called food science and the food science technologies. I'm not expert in that area. I think if we get some really great people looking at millets, there will be a lot of potentials. So what is currently happening in the space of millet and the value addition and the processing is we are trying, I call them first generation products, coming from millets, which are like products similar to what we do currently from, let's say, wheat. So, and from, let's say, maize. So you get a lot of similar products currently which are coming out of processing. So I was visiting a place called NutriHub in Indian Institute of Millet Research. So they have a special wing where they are developing value additions, on the millets. And my understanding, they have developed, at least, probably close to more than 50 different recipes, from millets. And those could all the way, range from, something you can consume unprocessed, like they make a flex of sorghum, which can be consumed unprocessed, to all the way something more processed, such as, there are extruders which can take the millet flour and mix it with some other nutrients, and which kids will love them, with different flavors, like the chips, or like the. So I think there's a lot of potential actually, and we are seeing, I like to call, the first generation of potential, which is just mimicking what you have been doing with wheat and other cereals.
Yes, Mark. Anything to add
and
on the value addition?
sure, that potential will not be realized if we are consuming 80% of the harvest for food for the household, and only probably selling the rest. So we have to produce more, so that more of these grains are in the market for other uses. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us on this first segment. Just stick around. We're going to come back with Dr. Harish and Dr. Mark to discuss more about millet farming in Kenya and what this means, even as we talk about climate change. When we come back, we're going to delve deeper into these issues. Don't go too far.